Let's talk about Gumstick batteries. So useful for my favourite devices, but they're always a pain in the charger. So in this video I'm going to test some new batteries which I've bought to find out which ones are the best. And we're going to compare them with some of the older batteries to find out how worn out my old ones really are. First of all, here's an example of the sort of troubles I have with batteries. Ooh, no battery, that's weird because this battery's just come off a charge. Now, I'm not a qualified electronics boffin, but I do watch a few of them on YouTube. So I bought myself this fancy charger a few months ago to do some experiments with, and we're going to use this to find out how good these batteries really are, and to compare these two brands, which are easily available on Amazon, and there'll be links in the description, to find out which ones are the best. I don't know yet, I haven't done any testing. But the problem is with batteries is there's a lot of technical stuff which is beyond the scope of me, because I'm not an expert, and beyond the scope of most people. So what I'm going to try and do is put it in layman's terms that we can all understand, because I am a layman. So first of all, what's the difference between these flat Gumstick batteries and one of these, a typical rechargeable battery? This one happens to be from Amazon. The difference is this one's round. I know that sounds obvious, but otherwise they're the same chemistry. Nickel-Metal Hydride is the chemical combination in this one and also in these batteries. So these are just the flat equivalent of these. Okay, so the reason I bought this one is because it's got a couple of really useful features on it. It does a normal charge, and for those who are technically minded, it uses the negative delta V method to find out when the battery is fully charged, or the heat method to find out when the battery is fully charged. But most people don't need to worry about that. But what this does allow me to do is it allows me to do two useful tests. One is a quick test to find out how good the battery is, and one is a longer test where it fully charges the battery, then discharges the battery using a resistor, and then fully charges the battery again. But what it does is it measures how much energy the battery can output. So once it's fully charged, it then starts to discharge it, and it measures how much output that battery has, so you can see how long your battery is going to last in your device. So just for the pedants out there, these are not batteries. Two together in series is a battery, but one alone is a cell. But that's not the term that most people use. If you're using the term cell when you refer to one of these, this video is not for you. You know what you're talking about. There's nothing I'm going to tell you which is going to be new. By all means, carry on watching. So a battery, we're going to call it a battery. A battery is just a charge of electricity. It's a store of electricity. You charge the battery up in a charger, then you put your battery into your device, and then the electricity from the battery goes into the device and it powers it. So here's an important technical fact which we're going to refer to many times. The battery can only hold a certain amount of charge, and this is the measurement we're going to use. I know there's watt hours. If you know what a watt hour is, again, this video is too simple for you. So we're going to use mAh because it's on all of these batteries. It's also on all rechargeable batteries, and it is potentially how much energy the battery can store when it's brand new. So this is 2400 milliamp hours. Now milli is 1000th, so it's 2.4 amp hours. We're just going to call it milliamp hours, mAh, 2400 in this pretty decent Amazon Basics battery. These ones, because they're flat and they can't have so much chemistry in them, these ones are rated for 1400 milliamp hours, and these ones slightly higher at 1450 milliamp hours. You'll see these ratings on your portable power banks you might buy from Amazon or eBay, or even the cheap ones that you get from Poundland. They'll all have a milliamp hour value. That one's 4000, but when I bought this and I tested it, it was only giving me 2687. They're all liars. These companies all lie to you. The only ones that will give you somewhere close are the well-known brands such as Anker. the really well-known brands. This is just badged Vido, but it's bought from some Chinese manufacturer who makes loads of them and just stamps them up with your name on them. These appear to be quite well-respected brands in the Mindisc and cassette community. So this is the figure we're going to be looking for when we do these tests. We're going to see how close these batteries get to their stated capacity, but expect it to be quite a bit lower in most cases. Now, so I don't get muddled up, the year now is 2024, and we're going to call this battery A, B, and C. And here's an older battery which I got with a Mindisc player. It was in the Mindisc player already. So we're going to call it 2023. I don't know how old it is, but we're going to call it 2023A. Because this battery charger can take 4 batteries and I want to charge them all together. I'm just going to pull out the power at the moment. And I'm going to slot them in. Now unfortunately you have to put the batteries in at a funny angle, otherwise they don't match up with the dimples on the charger and they don't charge. So in no particular order, I'm just going to bung them all in there. And we'll be comparing some of the older ones of these ones. I've used these a lot in the past. I'm quite happy with them, but I think they don't last very long, especially with the sort of charging regime that I had for my devices. So let's plug all those in there. I'm going to plug it back in again and hopefully they'll all be recognised straight away. Let's have a look. And we're going to go straight to mode. Yeah, they are, that's handy. And we're going to select the quick test. So this is now going to look at all these batteries and do a quick test. It's going to measure the internal resistance. So again, if you can imagine, there's a certain amount of charge the battery can have, but when it's giving up its charge, then it will have, it uses up some of that charge to get the energy out of the battery. There's a resistance, the chemistry resists releasing some of that charge. And energy can't be lost, so basically that resistance creates heat. Not that we would notice it, but some of the energy is lost in heat in trying to deliver that charge out of the battery. Now this is quite interesting. This is a new one, that's a new one, that's a new one, and that's an old one. And this is the internal resistance that this charger has estimated for these batteries. This one's got a higher internal resistance, and therefore it will be able to get less of its charge delivered as useful power when it's fully charged. But that could be because the contact is not making a good contact on these batteries. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to spin it around a little bit. So that's 155. We're going to take that one out again. Just move it around and make sure, try to make sure we've got a good charge, a good contact on that battery. And it should measure its internal resistance again. There we go. So when it says null, it means it doesn't think it's got a battery in there, so it can't really tell. There we go, that should be it now. There we go, let's try it now. Let's do a quick test on that one again. 135, pretty close, so we know that one's good. Now both of these came in the same pack, these new ones, but it was just basically an envelope like that. So that one's got quite a high internal resistance. And once you've done enough of these tests, you can tell how good a battery is just by using this quick test. Again, quite low on that one. So these two are new and they're quite different, the amount of resistance they've got. Let's swap them over. Could be the charger. But you'll never have to worry about this too much if you're just using a regular old charger. I'm just doing this for demonstration. Yeah, even more now. That's got less resistance. This has got even more resistance. So it could be that this battery is not very good. Straight out of the, new from the manufacturer. Yep, it's high, not as high, but it's still high. This one, 172. Let's just test this one again. It's got a high resistance now, so that could be just the charger. It's not making a good contact. In all honesty, I don't use this test very often. 92, so that's quite low now. So in any case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to full charge on these batteries. So the easiest thing for me to do is unplug it, because when you set the mode, that mode stays on until it loses power or until you pull the battery out, and I'd have to pull 4 batteries out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go on to a charge test, and I'm going to set the charge level, that's the amount of charge it's putting into each battery, quite low. The lowest it does on here is 200 milliamps. So it's going to deliver 200 milliamps charge to each of these batteries until the battery is full. Then it's going to discharge the battery. I'm just going to put that one back in. That one doesn't look as if it's in properly. I'm then going to discharge the battery, or this charger will discharge it and measure the amount of energy the battery then gives up for each one. So what I think it does is it discharges by putting it through some sort of circuit which can give it a resistance where the energy is turned into heat, but also it can monitor how much energy that battery is giving out. And there's a fan on there as well, so as it gets hotter the fan kicks in and turns off when it doesn't need to be on. So it's going to charge up at 200 milliamps, and then it's going to discharge also at 200 milliamps, and then charge again so they're full to 200 milliamps. That's going to take all night, so we'll pick up this video another time. Right, so it's the next day, and what I've done with these ones is I've put these in. This charger has a discharge test function, and what it does is it charges the battery up to full, then it discharges it and measures how much power the battery can output, and then for my convenience it will recharge it again so the battery is full. And these figures here, see if I can get the display to stay, and I've done it on 200 milliamps charge. For those experts here, I've done the charge at 200 milliamps because I have to set the discharge rate the same as the charge rate, and 200 milliamps, 200 milliamp hours is the lowest discharge rate that this charger can discharge at. It's still more than a mini disc player would discharge at, but I wanted it to be as close to the discharge rate of a mini disc player or a cassette Walkman. Anyway, so what it's done is it's gone through and it's charged all these up and then discharged them, and hopefully I'm just going to have to pause this a second because I need it to go back and show me what the results are. Okay, I can't get it to go back, so I'm glad I shot a little bit of video. So those numbers that were flashing were the amount of power that the battery gave out while the charger was discharging them. So that's an estimate of the battery capacity. So on the left we've got the new one from Vapex, and that was supposed to be 1450 milliamp hour capacity, but I think it was about 1100, so it's quite a bit less than it should be. This one is 2024A, so this one's a new one. That one was giving just a little bit less than it stated, 1400 milliamp hours. This is 2024B, so this again is a new one, and that was giving me more than the stated 1400 milliamp hours. And finally, this one here is the used one. The figures are all below, as you can see. That was the used one, and that was giving me less than the stated milliamp hour capacity. Now, as the batteries get older, they will be able to take less charge and give out less charge. Now, these are new batteries. These three are new batteries, and it is said that a new battery should be charged and discharged a couple of times before it reaches its full capacity. So I'm going to test that later. I'm going to do this whole thing again, and discharge them all, recharge them all, discharge them, and measure how much the discharge is for the second or third round of discharge to see whether their capacity has improved, being quite new batteries. So we'll come back to that later. Meanwhile, what I want to do is I want to take these out and leave them a few days and then measure how much voltage is in them after I've left them a few days. But first of all, let's get a benchmark for that and see how much voltage they've got now. Okay, you will have noticed that this one had started charging in the charger again. Now what this charger does is it once it gets it to its full charge, it just keeps it topped up with a trickle charge, so it's always at its maximum capacity. So let's measure the voltages then. First of all, this new one, 2024A, that's registering 1.44 volts, which is not bad because it's a 1.2 volt battery. But when they're fully charged, they'll register more volts. When they're discharged, they'll register fewer volts, less voltage. And I'll come on to that later on because that's important when you're using it in Mindisc players. So the second one, oops, 1.42. So that's a new one as well. This third one is the new one from Vapex. 1.43. It's hard to get the probes on there with enough force to get a good reading. 1.44 as well. Okay, that's good. And this one here is the used one, but still pretty good condition, I think. 1.43. Now that's really proved that this battery charger does keep it topped up. That's about as much as you're going to get from a fully charged battery. So that's not the whole story. I'm going to explain this a bit later on, but what I'm going to do now is I'm going to measure the voltage while the batteries are under load. So I've got a setting here. So this is where this what I've just done is measured it and the battery is not doing any work. When the battery is doing work, the voltage will go down. I'll explain that later on in the video. So I'm setting this, the closest I could get is the 1.5 volts, and it's going to apply a load to the battery and measure the voltage to see what it is. And the better a battery is, the closer it will be to its original figure when it's under load. So that's under load now, and that's giving us, it's hard to get good contacts. Let's try again. I'm just going to move that a little bit. That'd be much better. There we go, 1.23, 1.22, 1.23. So under load it's giving us 1.23, 1.24, 1.31, that's interesting, because that one took less charge than the other two. And 1.25, so that's the used one. So I'm going to sort of create a table or something once I've done all the batteries and compare them all. But for now, that's the end for today. So what I've got to do now is I set those aside. I'm going to test those in a few days' time to see what those voltages will be, because they do self-discharge, and that's what I want to test. So now I've got these 5 Nickel-Metal Hydride ones, which are used all in various states. That's an original one from Sony. That's an original one from Sony as well. So these are probably 30 years old, something like that, 30 or 40 years old. Let me think, no, 30 years old, 25, 30 years old, something like that. This one's a NiCad, nickel-cadmium battery, and I think this one's dead. So I've got all these to charge. I'll do exactly the same, and we'll come back once these have charged and discharged and have a look at their capacities as well. There we go, all the Vapex ones, all in a line, and we're going to select the discharge test. I'll have to reset that. Right, so let me show you how to set this up. So I'm going to go to the mode once it's finished booting. I'm going to go to the mode and go for the discharge test. Charge test, it says. There is no discharge test. It is actually a discharge test, but it says it's a charge test. So charge test. And I set the current, as I say, to the closest we can get to what a Mindisc player and Mindisc Cassette Walkman will use, which is 200 milliamps. I'm sure it's probably a lot less than that those devices use, but that's the lowest this one goes. So this is going to charge up at 200 milliamps until the battery is fully charged. It's going to discharge it at 200 milliamps and find out what the capacity is, and then for my convenience it's going to charge them back up so they're fully charged afterwards. I'll probably take 7 or 8 hours to get all that, maybe 9 hours. So I'll do that for that one, and then we'll come back and we'll look at the 2 original Sony ones, which are Nickel-Metal Hydride, and also the poor old Panasonic NiCad, which is, I know that's pretty dead at the moment, but we'll get some charge out of that as well. Okay, so it's the next day and the next batch of batteries has been done and tested. So let's have a look at this one. This is 1298. And I previously checked this and it was 1304 and that was the date. So 1298. So I've just written that on the battery, and that's probably our how we're going to identify the battery anyway. So let's have a look at this one. This one is 1268. That's not bad because these are at least a year old, I think. So 1268. That's actually higher than it was before. So let me write that on. And it says cassette only on there. I'll come back to that later on. So this one is, oh, it's just gone back on charge again. So I'll probably have to, I can find out what that was when I review the video. So I'll review the video and write that one down in a minute. And that one says 1894, which is quite a low amount. So 894, let me write that one. There we go, so I wrote 894, so that's the capacity of this. So it's, you know, about 2/3 of what it should be really, but it's probably quite an old battery. So let me just look up what this other battery was by reviewing the video, and then we'll test those for voltage. Okay, so that's voltage I didn't know was the milliamp hours capacity on this one was 1375. Still a good battery, that one. Right, so let's check the voltages on here. .44, 1.40, 1.45, 1.39. That's without a load, so let's check it with a load. .3, 1.25, 1.32, 1.25. Okay. Let's check those again. So the battery that had a 1298 milliamp hour capacity is 1.3. 1268 is 1.24 now. The one that's really quite good, 1.3, and the one that's really quite bad, 1.2. Okay, interesting. Right, so I've got one more batch of batteries to charge and test. That includes this nickel-cadmium one, which I think has almost had it, and 2 original Sony batteries that came with mini disc players. I would imagine mini disc players in the 1990s. So let's put those in the charger and come back and look at the results later. It has been a number of days since I put these on charge, and they've just been sitting there. They got charged, and this charger's been keeping them topped up for me. But it's done the charge test, and this one, these are, don't forget, these are original Sony and original Sony cells. And this one here has a current capacity of 961 milliamp hours. And it's supposed to be probably about 1400, something like that. I don't think it says on there, but it's quite old. Let's have a look. No, I can't see it. Okay, this one has a paltry 670 milliamp hours. And this one, this is the NiCad, it only has 66 milliamp hours, which is practically no power at all. That one is officially dead, and the reason I'm keeping it is because there's not many around. It's more of a museum piece now, unfortunately. But yeah, NiCads, we're not talking about those charging those on this video. Right, so I'm going to have to look back on the video. Oh, we've got to do a charge test. Hang on a second. So let's check the voltage with no load. We've got 1.42 and Again 1.42, so this charger keeps them topped up nicely at 1.42. And let's do a charge test on with a load now. There we go. .33 and 1.36. So what I've got to do now is review all the videos I've taken, some of which were last week, and then I've got to do one test of the new batteries I've got to do to see how much charge they've lost since then, and then I'm going to sum up with my suggestions and what I found out during these tests. So these are the figures for these batteries which have just had a discharge. They haven't been recharged after they were sitting there for 18 days. They've just been discharged, and this is the energy it gave out. So there's 1,191 milliamp hours on this one. And when we first did the charge, that was 1,246 milliamp hours. So that's quite a bit of difference. And this next one has 1,237 milliamp hours of energy left in it after the self-discharge. And that had 1,497, so it's quite a bit of difference on that one. And finally, this one had 1,143 milliamp hours of energy left in it after the self-discharge, and that's pretty good because when we did the first charge test it was 1,183, so only 40 milliamp hours was lost on that battery after 18 days just sitting on the desk. So I'm going to do a final charge and discharge test. So these are flat now, so I'm going to charge them all up, and then the battery charger will discharge them all, measuring the output, and then it will charge them back up just to make it easier for me. And then I'll get back to you with those discharge figures in a bit. You'll be pleased to know this is the final test. So these batteries have been fully charged from flat and then discharged, and the charger has measured the amount of energy they gave off, and this is the third discharge test we've done. I can only compare it with the first one we did, and these batteries now should be conditioned and should be giving quite true figures now. So this one was 1,304 milliamp hours. That was how much charge it gave out when it was discharged, and compared to the first time we did one of these tests, it was 1,246, so slightly better than before. This one is 1,428 milliamp hours, and that's slightly worse than before, which was 1,497. And this Vapex one is 1,317 milliamp hours, and the first time we tested that it was 1,183. So that's quite a significant improvement. So these Vapex ones perhaps need more charges to get them conditioned when they're new than these two. So I'm going to write those figures down now, and I'm going to come up with some conclusions which I'll give you at the end of the video. But first of all, let me tell you why I think this is all important. So this is quite an old battery. It doesn't have much capacity left because the chemistry just breaks down over time, and it can't charge or give off as much energy as it used to. I've written cassette only on that for a reason I'll tell you in a minute. But as a battery gets older, its chemistry degrades a little bit, and it can't accept as much charge, and it can't give off as much energy. And then if you charge it up to full and then set it aside, it also discharges, has a self-discharge in it. And depending on the player you're using, that can sometimes cause this problem, where it doesn't actually register like it's got a battery in it. And U01 is the low battery error on this Panasonic one. So you can hear it making a sound. Oh, it's on hold. There we go. So you can see there it's saying low battery. Even though this was fully charged, it's not a good high capacity battery, and it's been sitting there for a little while and not being used. So let's take an equivalent of Vapex. This is the brand new one I've been using, and this has been charged 3 times now and discharged. And hopefully this will give us a better reading. You can see there it's going to full battery, and it plays without a problem. So this has just come off a charge, and it's a higher capacity battery because it's brand new essentially. So let's find one that's in the middle ground. So this one, again, has got cassette only on it because I've had problems with this battery before. So let's try it in the mini disc player. So yeah, this one's been sitting there for a long while and now can barely get the disc spinning. It's saying low battery, but hopefully it will read it and we'll see whether that battery indicator goes up. Okay, it's not reading it at the moment. I'm just going to try it one more time. Don't forget that battery's been sitting there for a while, not being used, and it has lost a bit of its capacity from when it was new. There we go, so it's read it, and you can see now that battery indicator went up a little bit. I'm going to press play now. Again, it's playing. So this battery can just about get this player working. There's a number of reasons for that. See, the battery level's gone up to 2 bars now instead of 1. So do you remember we tested the voltage when the battery wasn't doing anything, there was no load, and then we compared it with the voltage given off by the battery when the battery was being under load, when there was a resistor in the multimeter that put the battery under load and the voltage went down. I think these battery level meters are based on the voltage of the battery. So if you put the battery in and there's no disc for it to spin, then it's going to give us a higher reading. But when it's got to spin the disc up and move the read-write head across and the laser's active trying to detect the disc and the table of contents, that draws a lot of power, puts a lot of load on the battery, and the voltage goes down and the meter goes down. But then once it's playing and there's not so much load on it, the battery level goes back up again. And that's simply a fact of the chemistry. The battery can only output so much power, and if it's under a lot of load, the voltage goes down. There's a formula for it, but we don't need to worry about that. We know the battery can only output so much power at a time, but if it's being forced to do a lot of work, then the voltage goes down. And that's why I put cassette only on this battery. Let me show you my Walkman. Right, so I can take the battery out of the mini disc player, pop it in the Walkman, and then we'll have a look at the remote. There we go, we can see the battery. There's no battery indicator on that, so I'm going to press play. Now that's playing and the battery level appears full. So despite the fact that this is moving the capstan and the pinch roller and pulling the tape around and actually playing the tape, this is showing a higher level of battery, because despite the fact that this seems to be much more mechanical, these players actually draw more power from the battery. So you need a better battery for your mini disc players, especially recorders, than you do for your cassette Walkmans. Another thing to know is a recorder probably uses more battery than just a player. Now a player is going to have the laser which does the reading. Now the laser also it heats up the disc to enable it to write on a recorder, and just that white thing there is the magnetic record head. So the laser heats it up and the magnetic record head writes it magnetically, but then it's read optically afterwards. But of course you've got that write head and this read and heating head, a laser lens, move backwards and forwards together. So there's more mechanical stuff to move on a recorder than there is on just a player. If you can see in just a player, there's nothing at the top, it's just the laser at the bottom. So this requires more power than this. So your battery needs to be even better if you're doing recording, if you're using a recorder, even if you're playing it, because there's more mechanical stuff to move around. And finally, the other thing that I've realised is Panasonics use more power. They need a better charged battery than a Sony. I think Sony really was the king of mini disc players and recorders, and I think they were more efficient. I haven't compared the figures model by model versus Panasonic and Sony because you can't really do that comparison. But I believe that Sony's, it's just my anecdotal experience, Sony's require or don't require as much power as Panasonic's do to run. But out of all of these mini disc players, this one probably will run longest on any given battery. So basically, in terms of the strength of your battery, you need a better battery for Panasonic's than you do for Sony's. You need a better battery for recorders than you do for players. And even if you've got some older batteries, they're still going to be good in one of the more recent Sony Walkman cassette players. So 21 days after I started testing all these batteries, here are the figures. This is the spreadsheet I've made, and I'll show you it more clearly on the screen in a minute. On the left hand side we've got the battery name. They're roughly, I think they're in the right order there. The internal resistance, which is supposedly a good quick measurement of how good a battery is, these figures don't correlate with any of the other figures as far as I can see. This column here is the first test I did. So the capacity test is where they were charged up to full, and then they had a full discharge, and the charger was measuring how much energy each of these batteries gave off. Now don't forget, these three at the top are new. This one here wasn't new, but I don't think it was very old, and these are older batteries here, and these are the older original 25 to 30-year-old Sony batteries. So after doing the capacity test, I checked how many volts the batteries were at, and then checked how many volts when the batteries were under load, which is important when it comes to putting them into a mini disc player. Then I set them aside. So these ones are set aside for 18 days, these ones are set aside for 10 days, and this shows the volts after they'd been just sitting on the desk for 18 days. You can compare these figures with the volts just after the charge. And then I also looked at the volts when they were under load after 18 days. And that's where you're comparing these figures here. So there's a significant loss of volts the longer you leave the batteries after they've been charged. So this shows how much power was left in them after a full charge and then just sitting on the desk for 18 days not doing anything. So this is an indication of how much they discharge when they're not being used, not in a device, just sitting on the desk. And these figures you'll be comparing with these figures here, which were immediately after they've been fully charged. And then finally, this column here matches the first capacity test, in that they were fully charged and then they were discharged by the charger, and this was the energy they gave out. So this figure here, this column here, matches up with this column here. And by this time, these have been charged 3 times, and you are supposedly supposed to charge them fully a few times before they reach their full capacity. So let's have a look at the figures then. So this Doublepow battery, there's 2 Doublepow ones bought at the same time in the same pack, and they're supposed to have 1400 milliamp hours as their designed capacity. And you can see from the figures here that the 2 batteries, I'm just going to zoom in a bit more here. You can see the top 2 here are the Doublepow ones, and there's a significant variation in how good these batteries are and how much capacity you can get. That one there is actually showing you a greater capacity than it's supposed to, and this one here is showing you a little bit less. And then the Vapex one is supposed to be 1450 milliamp hours, and that was actually giving off 1317. So which of these brands is best to get? This one theoretically has a greater charge capacity because it says it's a charge capacity of 1450, where these are only 1400. But the figures don't really bear it out. So this one here, supposedly a capacity of 1400, can actually give out 1304 milliamp hours, so slightly less. But this one here can give out 1428 milliamp hours, which is slightly more. And then somewhere in the middle, a little bit better than that one, is this Vapex one, which is 1317. So even though these were delivered in the same batch and they came from the same supplier, the figures don't, they vary quite a bit. And this one here is roughly in line with that one. So really, I think you might as well just choose it based on colour. It wouldn't surprise me at all if these batteries were exactly the same from the same manufacturer inside. Because what I think they do, and I haven't checked this, but if you have a look at those, they just shrink wrap the outer casing. They shrink wrap the plastic on the outside. So let's have a look. There's a slight difference in that, in the two. Let's have a look at that one as well. But it might just be that this piece of plastic shrink wrap is a slightly different size from this one. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if these batteries, and there's other ones which are available as well on eBay and possibly Amazon, and they're just green. So I would guess that they all come from the same supplier. There's one battery manufacturer, and Doublepow says we want a 1400 milliamp hour battery. Vapex says we want a 1450 milliamp hour battery. There's no evidence to me that shows that one is worth the extra 50 milliamp hours. So I think Doublepow, say, mark these up as ours, and Vapex say mark these up as ours. And there's some green batteries, the same type online, which I haven't tested, but it wouldn't surprise me if the manufacturer is selling those green batteries directly without any branding on them. So when it comes to which is best, I know this is a long video and it's probably about over half an hour now after editing. I don't think there's a lot in it in terms of which battery you choose. These ones, I can't tell you about pricing, because if I tell you about pricing, Amazon gets the ump and will close my Amazon affiliate account. But these two were cheaper per battery because I bought two in one pack than this one. But do your own investigations, look online and find out which one suits you. If you want to, go for ones which are cheaper per battery. Right, so that's it as far as I'm concerned. I am not an expert in this, so if you think I've done it wrong, consider how much expertise you have. If you are in the battery construction industry, then I would consider you to be an expert. If you've taken qualifications in electronics, I would consider you to be a bit of an expert. But for the rest of us who don't have those backgrounds, then what we think we know to be true is just hearsay from what we've heard from other people without any study. So if you're a real expert and you think I've got it wrong, please let me know in the comments, because that's how I learn stuff. So thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.